I pledge to stay drug-free.
I plan to stay drug-free.
I pledge to stay drug-free.
I pledge to be drug-free.
I pledge to stay drug-free.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Expose Under the Sun, sponsored by the Detroit Native Sun newspaper. I'm your host, Darwin Griffin, and we are going to be enriched for the next half an hour with my special guests. And we're going to talk about what's going on over there with the new Amazon distribution center that's getting ready to, they're breaking ground over there on the fairgrounds location to put a distribution center. And there are some people that are concerned about the distribution center that Amazon is getting ready to build on that site. So before we get started, our calling numbers are area code 313-868-0342, 313-868-0351, or 313-868-4336. Our website is www.tv33whpr.com. And if you are watching us from Detroit, you are watching us under the auspices of the Honorable Mayor Michael Duggan. And if you're watching us from the city of Highland Park, where we're live from, where our studios is at, and you are watching us under the auspices of the Honorable Mayor Hubert Yap. But again, I do want to thank Mr. R.J. Watkins and also Henry Tyler for allowing us to spend this half an hour with you every Tuesday from 2:30 to 3 o'clock. Before we get started, we just had a historic election. And I don't know where a lot of you are at when it comes down to who you were supporting or who you were working with or who you were trying to go and get either another 4 years or to see to be the new president of the United States. But wherever you were at, whatever side of the fence that you were on, we're just hoping and praying that everyone takes time to go and realize that this is the United States and not divided, not the blue states, not the red states, but it's the United States. And we are all in this together. So whatever your differences are, make sure that you talk about your differences. Don't have any animosity. Don't have any physical confrontations with anyone. Speak about it, talk about it, and then also be reminded to pray about it as well. Because our nation, this is a time for healing, not for hindrance of any of our peace and our social justices. So we just want to make certain that everybody realizes that this is a time for healing. But there's a lot of things that's also going on, as well. So we have to, make certain that we are addressing those things. And right now, a lot of you have probably ventured to the state fairgrounds when the fairgrounds was in its heyday. I remember my mother and father taking me up to the fairgrounds. I remember one of the first dates that I had when I was in high school was going to the Michigan State Fairgrounds. And this was before I even had a driver's license. So my father, it was interesting. I love my father. God rest his soul. My father took me to the State Fairgrounds, me and my date fell in love with my father. And, I was so envious because my father could, he could charm anything off of somebody. But, he, all during the time that we were at the State Fairgrounds, it was so funny because all my date was saying was talking about, your father is so nice. Your father is so nice. And I'm trying to show her the different exhibits. We're trying to take the rides and everything like that. But we had a good time. But now we're in the process of looking at, there's a lot of differences that's going on. And the State Fairgrounds has been dormant for many years. And there's a group called the State Fairgrounds Development Coalition. And my guests today are, to my right, Miss Karen Hammer and also Miss Tanya Myers Phillips. Ladies, I welcome you to the show today.
Thank you.
Now,
Thank you.
Tanya, can you talk about a little bit what is the State Fairgrounds Development Coalition and what is your purpose behind the sale of Amazon coming here? Karen.
The State Fairgrounds Development Coalition is a volunteer grassroots organization that sprang up spontaneously while the land was being held by the state of Michigan. The state of Michigan held the land for about 8 years after Granholm shut it down. The excuse was that it wasn't making enough to survive, and that wasn't true. There were year-round activities going on that financed it.
Such as what?
Well, Steve Jenkins, the manager of the State Fair at that time, had a horse academy for children. There was also a gymnastics, and there were after-school programs. There was a Little Caesars hockey arena, and I'm blanking out, but in the brochure I gave you, there are other uses that he put it to. There's a letter from him where he details all the things that were going on at the time. So it wasn't really an issue of it not paying for itself. Mm-hmm. And it was an issue of the state had decided in the 90s they didn't want it to be a public venue. They wanted it to be a private venue to make profit for whomever. Mm-hmm. And she used the fact of the downturn in the economy.
She being Governor Granholm.
Yes, much later on to affect that. She did make a statement, if you can get 55,000 signatures, I'll keep it open, which people did. And the legislature voted for it, but she vetoed it. So she was set on making it private property. And at that point, the only bid accepted by the state, and it was really the only bid, was by Magic Johnson LLC. The land lay fallow for many years. While they were accepted, they were not building and they were not moving forward. At that time, the land bank finally made a decision to sell it. They sold it in 2 parcels, one to the city, and that was in early 2019, and the other parcel was to the Magic Plus Group, which...
So this was just last year?
Beginning of last year. And at that time, it was 16 acres went to the Magic Group and 142 went to the city. Until then, the city had nothing to say about it. So anyway, by then, our coalition had been running. We had a lot of people from around the state and around the region. And then eventually, from about 2015 on, we focused a lot in the city and did a public engagement. We also had a set of members who were architects and landscape architects who put into visual form all the things that people felt would be a good use of the fairgrounds for the people, like the fair was. And it included reuse of the structures, the historic structures. It included training and jobs in the energy industry, sustainable energy field, because those would be jobs that wouldn't go away. And it included transportation, because at that time the RTA was a thing. So regional transit was being considered, and it would be a transit hub there.
So what was it that you wanted to develop on the land itself?
Well, we didn't advocate a development or a plan. we advocated 7 things that should be considered whatever the development was.
Okay.
And the Meta Expo, which the visual form that the landscape architects and the architect put out, was one idea. But it didn't have to be the only idea, it didn't have to be done that way. It just had to contain those elements that dealt with historic structures, that had dealt with urban farming, that dealt with sustainability, and job training, and jobs, and education,
Okay.
and urban. Did I mention urban agriculture? Anyway, and those were strictly from the people. There was we did a lot of summarizing through house meetings, through neighborhood meetings. We actually, for 2 years, did a neighborhood engagement summary, and those results were published by D4, which was part of the coalition.
Okay.
And as time has gone on, since the mayor bought the land for the city of Detroit, from the first day he said he wanted it to be industrial. And he didn't think that any of the buildings could be saved. So we had our our indication at that time where he was
Where
going.
he was leaning towards. Okay. Now,
And I wonder, could I add
ahead.
something there? Just in terms of why this is important. Because the State Fairgrounds Development Coalition is a volunteer organization comprised of community residents. And we've heard the question a lot of times about, well, what's your plan for the development? Community residents are not developers. The coalition is not saying that we're a developer. But what the coalition did is what our government had the responsibility to do, which is engage community members in the planning for that site. You know, we are the community, we are the residents, and we deserve to have a say in how development is conducted in this city, because it impacts human lives, it impacts our lives. So in this particular process, that did not happen. We received an announcement on August 11th that Amazon is coming, and that's just all it is to it.
August 11th, meaning a couple of months ago.
Correct.
Correct. That the agreement is has
It's
been
a done deal.
Yeah. So, you know, there wasn't a plan to do any community engagement at all. You know, our advocacy pushed for the community meetings that did happen, but none of that was scheduled at all.
Now, would you have wanted to have seen this on the ballot, as far as, say, to have the residents of Detroit to vote on the sale of the property?
No, but what the residents did vote on was a community benefits process.
Okay.
And that's part of why we brought our action, because the residents did vote in 2016. The residents said, look, when there's high value property at stake here, when there's property that's valued at $1 million or more, and you're attempting to put that property out for sale without a public bid, without an RFP, then that needs to go through a community benefits process so community members can say, hey, you know, this is what we'd like to see out of this project. Hey, these are the type of protections we like to see. There's actually a process within the community benefits ordinance where citizens can be involved in monitoring and making sure that the developer follows through on their promises, right? We're Detroiters, and we've seen this time and time again where developers say they're going to do one thing, they bring in their fancy PowerPoints, and then once the ink is dried, you don't see them anymore, right? Little Caesars Arena, right? Need we say any more? So Detroit has had a long, sad history of disappointments and, frankly, abuse of our neighbors at the hands of developers that are out for their corporate interests at the expense of the health and safety and general welfare of neighborhood residents. So that community benefits process is a way that the voters determine we can monitor this. We can have enforcement mechanisms in place in case the developers, you know, start going another way and taking actions that harm us. That's what we said. Did Amazon fit the Meta Expo vision? No. But at the time, we said, okay, even if this is the proposal, this proposal needs to come through a community-based process.
I got
And
you.
it did not, and that's
Okay.
what we're still advocating for now.
Well, we're about to take a break, and when we come back from break, I want to ask you, Tanya, more about what happened in terms of, say, when it went to court.
Sure.
And what happened. So we're going to take a 2-minute break. So please stay tuned. I'm going to bring on Frank Hammer, and we're going to talk a little bit more, especially in terms of, say, about what happened when it came down to the vote with the city council, as well as trying to go and make certain in terms of, say, there was supposed to be a legal action that was supposed to be heard in the courts. And that's what Tanya Phillips is going to talk more about when we come back from our break. So stay tuned. We've got more to come. We're back, and we have been joined now by Frank Hammer. And Frank, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much.
And just wanted to ask you, Tanya, before we get to Frank, just tell what happened in terms of seeing the courts in the past week.
Well, a lot has happened. So we filed a complaint in the Wayne County Circuit Court, and part of the relief that we asked for was an injunction of the sale, basically to put the pause button in place and allow some of these legal issues to be worked out. In order to receive a temporary restraining order, we had to demonstrate to the trial court judge, the circuit court judge, that 4 elements had been met, that we would have a likelihood of success on the merits. Now, that doesn't mean that the case is done, it's over. That means it's enough where I'm going to hear what you have to say, right? So we had to demonstrate that. We had to demonstrate that there was irreparable harm at stake. And what we mentioned in our pleadings, what we stated, and still remains a concern, is that industrial pollution, we know from decades of research and experience and continued lived experience right here in our city, that diesel truck emissions are dangerous, that they cause respiratory illnesses, they cause cancers. People get sick when you live and reside and work in the shadow of diesel truck fumes. And those trucks, what the city downplayed a lot is that environmental impact. They very rarely mentioned it in our meetings, Darwin. And just picture this, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 18-wheelers coming down Woodward, blocking the entrance to your favorite establishments, coming down 8 Mile all day, every day, year in, year out. And the environmental pollution that travels, it doesn't just stop at the site, it travels with the air. And Detroit has an unfortunate history, and it's been documented in studies of our residents dying, significantly high numbers due to these respiratory illnesses living around industrial areas.
Okay.
So we know this. So we pled that this is an irreparable harm. When this happens, when the toxins are in your body, you can't just cough it out. It's happened, right? You have to deal with it. You have to live with it. You have to hope you live with it, right? So that's an irreparable harm that the community is facing. We looked at the balance of harms, and basically that's when the court says, they're trying to preserve the status quo, and that the community would be more harmed with the absence of a temporary restraining order than the city would be in having to wait a little longer, right? And then you demonstrate that there's a public interest at stake. So that's what we went and we said before the trial court judge. The trial court judge issued a temporary restraining order, 14 days. The hearing was supposed to happen on Monday, the 9th, right? Yesterday. But the city of Detroit went to the Court of Appeals, filed an emergency motion, which is pretty extraordinary because there's no right to appeal.
Okay.
Really, it's a discretionary decision that the Court of Appeals makes at this stage. And as part of what they cited as their basis for asking the Court of Appeals to step in was saying that Amazon would walk away that the deal would be over if they did not have this restraining order resolved on November 4th.
Okay.
So they're saying for a project that's supposed to be complete sometime in 2022, they couldn't spare 5 more days. It would throw off their holiday season if we had to wait 5 more days to go to court. Can't do it. Too much on the line.
Wow.
So they did that, and the Court of Appeals did dissolve the temporary restraining order, which allows them to go ahead and put shovels in the ground. They did
So they've
not.
already broke ground already to start the building of the plant.
They're
correct?
they're busy. I'm not sure exactly
How
you
much
know,
ground they broke. but
Exactly.
They broke a little bit of ground.
It's 5 days.
Okay, Frank, now what would you like to see done with the remaining parcel of land?
Can I just say one more thing though, just so the viewers are clear though? Our case is still active.
Okay.
So, we're working through issues of, obviously we wanted the whole thing to wait a little bit until we got some things sorted out. But we're still asserting that there's a role for community to play in oversight. And with the community outreach ordinance, that is a very recent ordinance that mandates that, there's more disclosure that's provided to community in these type of situations, So if a community member raises a concern about environment, raises a concern, they keep saying 1,200 jobs.
Right.
I mean, there's so many loopholes in that contract. I say you can drive one of those Amazon trucks through it. But if community had a concern, the city would have a responsibility to respond accurately and publicly. So there are still some things that we think are of benefit that can be received. Honestly, we think the city, these are things that they should just do as our representatives. We should not be in a position of having to seek redress from the courts for our public officials to actually look out for us. But I just wanted to let the viewers know that that process is still going on, even with, obviously the restraining order being dissolved. We didn't want that to happen, but the process still goes on.
Okay. Frank, so what would you like to see done with the remaining parcel of land?
So the 90% of the land that went to the city is already scheduled for development. Part of it, and a lot of the focus has been on the Amazon warehouse, which is going to occupy basically half the site. There are 2 other pieces of land that they've already got designated for industrial, for example, maybe an auto parts manufacturer. So, they had to change their master plan of the city of Detroit from a regional park, which is what the fairgrounds was, into light industrial. And that's what they did through the city council. And if you listen to the city council meetings, one of the city council members, Lauren Hood, complained about the process, and in fact originally voted to not have a vote because it was so rushed and there wasn't enough information for them to make a good decision about what the land should be, how the land should be designated. So the other part of the fairgrounds went to the Joel Ferguson and Najik Johnson partnership, which is now, I think, called the Gateway Partners, LLC. And we know a little bit about the MSU portion of this. MSU is wanting to designate 4 of the 16 acres that went to that developer as part of an innovation center where they would actually set up a school, an MSU school, for aspiring entrepreneurs. And they want to set up a facility there. They had wanted to set up a multimodal transit center, which was sort of kind of like a duplication of what the city was doing, and there wasn't any consultation between the two as far as we could see. And they're also going to want to have a hub for nonprofits. So we thought that this showed some of the advanced thinking that the community had been aspiring to when the State Fairgrounds Development Coalition came together and said, we want a 21st century vision for Detroit. We know, I'm an auto worker, I'm a retired auto worker, and this town is all about autos. It's all about the internal combustion engine. It's all about the Woodward Cruise. But you know what? We're going into a new century with larger concerns that are weighing on the planet, having to do, for example, with the changing climate. And so, yes.
So Frank, in the few minutes we have left, so now if somebody wants to be involved with your development operation, is there a number or is there contact information if they would like to get more involved in what you're doing now?
Absolutely. So we have a website.
Okay.
It's known as myfairgroundsfuture.org, and the first two letters are MI, fairgroundsfuture.org. We also have a phone number, 313-444-2560. We welcome any calls. We welcome also an email. You can send an email to sfdcmichigan@gmail.com. So, and we've been getting responses. People have been enthusiastic about what we've been advocating. They are certainly alarmed at the direction that this has taken, and really closing out any options for community input. And we're going to, like Tanya was saying, we're going to struggle on to pursue every avenue that we have that enables the community to weigh in on what should be designated at that site.
All right. Well, then we're going to have you back on the show
Absolutely.
again,
Thank
along
you.
with your lovely wife. But I'm very thankful that we've had Frank Hammer, Tanya Myers-Phillips, and also Karen Hammer to be guests on the show today to talk about what's going on there with the Amazon development plant that they're putting up, the distribution plant that they're building right there on that site. Again, give that contact information one more time. We're about to wrap up.
The number is 313-444-2560.
Okay.
And the website is myfairgroundsfuture.org. First two letters are MI.
MI. Okay. We want to thank our special guests that we've had on the show. We've got more to come. You've been watching Expose Under the Sun, sponsored by the Detroit Native Sun News. And you can pick up a copy of the Detroit Native Sun newspaper at your local Kroger supermarkets. And if you'd like to advertise with the Detroit Native Sun newspaper, you can contact Ms. Valerie Lockhart at area code 313-457-5944. And again, please make sure after this election, stay peaceful, stay masked up, and make certain too, those of you, contact somebody and let them know that you love them. Peace. Have a great rest of the afternoon.